Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Graphic Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Panel, and today's episode is a very, very exciting episode. Obviously, it's this Friday's episode, so it's going to be a manga, but this one's kind of a bit of a crossover. I was thinking very much against it whilst I was coming up with the idea for it, just because I kind of considered it cheating. But it is a manga, so I don't necessarily see too much of an issue with it other than the fact that it's a crossover between a Marvel character. But this week we're going to be doing the Deadpool manga. I believe it's 3 books, it might be 4. I don't remember, I have all of them. It was the first Marvel themed manga that I read. I read the X-Men one after that, and I don't remember if it was Captain America or Superman, but one of those two. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they both have one, but I read one of theirs. I don't remember which one. I'm very excited for it. We're gonna do the same thing we normally do. We can just break down the books and the story as it goes. Wanted to throw this out. Probably gonna mention it again at the end of the video, but we're up on YouTube. I think we're completely caught up on YouTube all the way up to Monday's episode, which was the Jason Todd breakdown. And also, I wanted to, before we get into anything, thank everybody for who's been listening and following at House More Than You Know. This episode will be back on normal time. When you're hearing this, it'll be coming out at 8 a.m. on Friday. But yeah, let's get right into the breakdown. I am very, very, very excited. I absolutely love this manga. Weirdly enough, Deadpool, I really like the character. I'm not a super big fan of Deadpool comics. I really like the Deadpool movies, and then I was a really big fan of this manga, but I didn't think I was going to be. So, I had saw the first one of these in the Walmart that I lived near for probably like 6-7 months, and it was just always on the shelf anytime I looked in the books, and I was always thought about getting it, but I just never would bring myself to buy it. And then after I started reading manga again, after getting back into Bleach, I started reading it, and I picked it up and I started reading it, and I was like, wow, this is really fucking good. And I like it so much more than basically every Deadpool comic that I've read, which is bizarre to me. The Deadpool comics, to me, I kind of read comic books to take myself away from the real world, kind of just, not necessarily as an escape, but like, you can kind of just put yourself in the world and like, not think about what's going on in the real world. And obviously Deadpool breaking the fourth wall and everything as much as he does, it's not as easy to do things like that. So that's the only reason I'm just never been as big of a Deadpool comic fan. For some reason, it's him doing the same exact thing though for the movies I love, so I don't really understand it. But let's get right into the breakdown, starting with the first book. So first off, sorry if you can hear the rain droplets on the roof. It's raining relatively bad here. And then, before we get too deep into this story, obviously it's a Deadpool manga. It's kind of crazy that it's even a thing. This isn't the mainline like continuity of Marvel. It's just a manga reimagining of Deadpool set in Japan with a very heavy Shonen Jump energy. A lot of meta humor and then crossovers from manga and from the greater Marvel universe. But let's get right into book 1. Book 1 starts with Deadpool getting to Japan. A lot of opening chaos. The book opens exactly how you'd kind of expect a Deadpool book to open. Deadpool narrates his own manga debut, breaks the fourth wall, and complains about finally getting into a Shonen Jump. He is recruited to join a new Japanese Avengers-style team based in Tokyo. The key theme to this story going forward is going to be that Deadpool desperately wants to be a huge star in Japan, whether it's superhero or he just wants to be popular. Like, he wants to be the thing in Japan. That's a very big thing and a very big aspiration of his throughout I think it's 3 books of this run. So that's very important to remember going forward. He just wants to be popular in Japan. I don't know what it is about this story in general, but Deadpool's never been one of my favorite characters to read about for what I was saying earlier, and then just a couple of other reasons too. I just never found his character relatively that interesting. Similar with Wolverine, I think characters like them are just harder to get into some of their stories. I like a lot of the more original X-Men series that had Wolverine in it, and then the original couple Wolverine solo runs I liked, but I'm just not the biggest fan. And same with Deadpool, I've just never been the biggest fan, so going into this, I definitely did not expect to like it as much as I did, but I think the people who wrote this story and then illustrated it specifically did a really, really good job at getting you interested and keeping you interested throughout the 3 or 4 books that there is of this. Next, Deadpool will meet the Japanese hero team. Deadpool meets the Japanese division of heroes, a parody, homage, hybrid squad. They don't trust him. He's loud, he ignores orders, he keeps referencing sales numbers. He argues with invisible narration boxes. The team sees him as a liability, which he very much is. He's a fucking psychopath. Especially in the comics, Deadpool is a psychopath. Deadpool sees this as very much as a branding opportunity if he can become the biggest hero in the biggest superhero squad in Japan. Then it's kind of a cool reference actually, because Superhero Squad was like a weird animated style show and a PS2 game back in the day for Marvel. But anyway, but he sees if he can obviously become the biggest superhero in this little squad, he'll be the biggest, most popular superhero in Japan, which will be his ultimate goal, is to be the most popular person in Japan. So right forward and onto the steps of his plan. And shortly after that, it goes really right into the first kind of conflict and big thing of the story. It's the first mission. Team goes on a mission to stop a villain attack in Tokyo. Instead of cooperating, Deadpool rushes ahead. He makes Flash a very, very flashy entrance. He tried to turn the fight into a main character moment instead of working as a team, as obviously you need to in situations like this when you have an entire team beside you. And it's big stakes like this with somebody attacking the entire city. He does end up defeating the enemies, which is obviously a good thing, but there's a lot of collateral damage. Think of it as the opening to Civil War. I know I always go back to Civil War, but where I'm throwing it to the movie here, where Wanda throws the people up in the air, or even in the book where the guy ends up exploding and causing 600 people to die. A lot of casualties come from these specific things, and Deadpool going about it the way that he did caused even more casualties than there could have or should have been. So this kind of sets up the main conflict of the book in general. Obviously, Deadpool wants to be a popular guy. He wants to be a star. He wants to be the main person people are talking about. But being a hero, especially a hero on a team like this, is a lot more than that. You got to be able to work as a team, and you got to be open to teamwork and not just trying to be the main guy and the main person that people care about. Because at the end of the day, it's always going to cause issues, not only just in the team, but in fights that you're in general. So it's one of those things. And then this leads us directly into, drumroll, the All Might crossover. All Might from My Hero Academia, obviously. We will do an episode about them at some point. Honestly, I might say it now, that might just be the next episode of manga that we do next Friday. I was actually trying to think of an episode we can do that I won't need to worry about doing the next 3 books immediately, just because, for one, for My Hero Academia, it's not as long, and then for 2, there's also the fact that I've only read like the first 8. I do really like the story, but there's just other ones that I read more. And then I also read a lot of just normal books also. Like right now I'm reading a book called The First Man in Rome. That's kind of what I've been sticking to and I'm reading the 4th book of Bleach right now. I finished the first 3, read them 3 times, 2 or 3 times, and then I got into the 4th one, and then I got kind of busy. I wasn't able to read for a while, and then I got into The First Man of Rome. So I've been reading that. It's about just kind of not necessarily even a power struggle, but a bunch of different families that are all looking to be the first man of Rome, which isn't like an actual person. It's more of a title that I give it to a person. But this isn't about that book. But I'll probably do My Hero Academia next Friday, so look forward to that. But back to the Deadpool manga. This is obviously one of the wildest moments, not only so far, but just that's going to happen in this book. At least me going in, I didn't expect to see All Might. And I'd imagine most people didn't expect to see All Might going into this, so Deadpool meets All Might from, like I said, My Hero Academia. Deadpool breaks the 4th wall about crossover rights, tries to copy all All Might's heroic poses, calls him legally distinct from Superman. All Might represents everything Deadpool isn't. Obviously, he's inspiring, he's noble, he's symbolic, he's basically everything everyone can look up to and nothing nobody can be ashamed of. This scene contrasts very much with just heroism and then the fucking bumbling fool that Deadpool is shown to be in the scene and then just is in general in the comics. So, as much as they also show him to not be a bumbling fool a lot of the time, so it's very interesting how they do him in the comics in general, but it's also interesting when you think about it. I don't remember the podcast it was, but Rob Liefeld was on a podcast recently, and he was talking about how Deadpool in his original couple runs didn't have a rogues gallery, really. Which, a rogues gallery, for people that don't know, is basically like Batman supervillains, or Spider-Man supervillains. Probably the most popular rogues galleries are those two. But it's basically just a list of supervillains that kind of come back and always are appearing throughout the history and the stories of the superhero. But Deadpool didn't really have that for a while. They were using a lot of the like C and D list villains from a bunch of different heroes to just throw at Deadpool for the years and years and years until Rob Liefeld apparently, I don't know why I said apparently, I read a lot of the books, started either creating new villains for him or giving him villains that were established, and so he could start developing and having his own rogues gallery. Sorry, I know we're very off track from what we were talking about a moment ago, but I thought that was kind of cool. I know Rob Liefeld is very hit and miss how people feel about him. I like a lot of the stuff he did for Image Comics, but I don't like a lot of the artwork he has in general, so it's one of those things. This leads us directly into the next scene. A larger threat begins forming behind the scenes. The villains start to exploit technology and use people's fears to kind of manipulate people to do what they want them to do. Deadpool doesn't take it seriously at first until civilians are genuinely endangered, and he starts to see that and recognize that. That's kind of when his hero journey starts to begin, and he starts to turn around where he's supposed to and be the hero that they've been leading to him becoming the entire story, and that they'll build to throughout the next couple stories. This is very much the tonal shift of the volume. The comedy turns into very much real stakes and real people being hurt and endangered, and Deadpool caring and trying to stop the forces of evil, for lack of a better term, from doing what they're trying to do and doing what they were trying to do in the first place. So this is a very big turning point of the book. Like I was saying, this is obviously a pretty big turning point in the story. After messing up again, Deadpool is sidelined for the first time. He isn't treated like a joke. He isn't praised. He isn't even needed by the team. He spirals internally, masked by jokes normally. He doesn't really know what to do or how to feel. He's very upset about seemingly what he's caused and did cause with all the destruction and chaos and then the people's lives that were lost. This is very surprisingly emotional for a Deadpool story. Even most of the emotional and or just sadder Deadpool stories in general that do happen, they don't normally get as dark as other sad stories. This is like a really sad and dark story especially for a Deadpool story. So I did think that was pretty interesting, and not even to mention that it is a manga also, and they're not necessarily known for having the darkest story, or it's a shonen manga, like it's Shonen Jump. Not necessarily known for having the darkest stories or characters of all time, so this is kind of interesting. But in the final battle of this fight, Deadpool returns, but differently. Instead of chasing Spotlight, he coordinates, he protects civilians, he buys time for the team, he takes real damage without playing it for laughs. His healing factor keeps him alive, but it hurts. This time, the pain isn't just a punchline, he's using it to truly help and save other people's lives. Which, again, like I've been saying, is a big fucking step. It's not only just in this book, but specifically for Deadpool as a character. Kind of similar to the Deadpool 2 movie where he's trying to prove that he's a superhero. After the battle, it's very important to remember that the team doesn't just instantly love him. This is very much an acknowledgement that he's okay, and Deadpool pretending not to care, but internally, it's the first time he's ever felt belonged or he belonged with someone other than like the X-Men or the Avengers. Even then, obviously, he's never felt truly like he belonged. The volume ends with a lot of more meta jokes, teasing future threats, Deadpool promising to become the top 10 in manga popularity ranking. The couple very big themes to kind of just keep your head up with, especially since there's a couple more stories that are following this one, is that the first one is definitely fame versus heroism. Deadpool equates relevance with value. Japan's structured hero culture forces him to confront that and very much change the way he looks at heroism as a whole in general. So that's really cool to look at. And then just the volume in general follows a very classic manga structure. An arrogant newcomer fails publicly, learns teamwork, redeems himself in a final fight, but filtered through meta comedy and just Deadpoolisms. So it's a new story, but it's a very old way of telling the story, and I thought that was kind of cool when you actually like kind of looked down and thought about it. And then underneath all of the jokes and the style, Deadpool is very much going through an identity crisis through most of this book. Deadpool wants validation. That's the emotional engine of the whole book. That he's trying to prove that he is a superhero as much as he's trying to also prove that he doesn't care about any of it at the same time. And then I thought it would be cool to kind of just talk about how this Deadpool from the manga did differ a bit from just the mainline Deadpool mangas. For Marvel Comics, for one, it's very much an ultra-violent satire story or way of doing the story. And then for the Samurai, Deadpool Samurai, it's very much a shonen battle structured story and way of the art. In Marvel, the dark humor is very heavy. In Deadpool's manga, it's very much fast-paced manga gags. In the Marvel comics, he's often very cynical. In the Deadpool manga, he's surprisingly very earnest, and he grows a lot throughout the story. And this is just the one book out of the three. And then obviously just the team dynamics are very different from like an X-Men in the United States or any of the teams in Japan for the Japanese style of the team. So, and that leads us directly into Volume 2, the Deadpool Samurai. I will, at the end of all of these, jump back a little bit and just kind of compare other Deadpool stories from not necessarily around this time period, but popular Deadpool stories to this Deadpool story. And just kind of compare the character and the things that happened with the character in general. Volume 2 is very much escalates everything from volume 1. There's bigger fights, more cameos, darker emotional beats, and very much more serious look at or a very much more serious look at Deadpool's insecurities. Obviously they jump pretty deep into that in the first one, so in this one they jump even further down into that and really get you to kind of listen and think about all of that. Obviously at the end of volume 1, Deadpool technically earned some respect from his teammates and earned some bit more trust than he had previously, but by volume 2 opens with a bit of reality. He still isn't considered trustworthy. He's still considered unstable. The team doesn't fully rely on him. Higher ups question if he's worth keeping around in the first place. And Deadpool responds the only way he, possibly could, by overcompensating. He wants a defining heroic moment, something legendary. The one thing I don't like about this part is just that it kind of seems like it undoes a little bit of the growth and character development from the first one. It's like kind of forgot about a little bit of it. But because it's a Deadpool story, you can kind of just look past it and like, oh, well, it doesn't necessarily matter because it's a Deadpool story. It's always going to get to the same place it wants to get to, no matter what the flaws of the story in general are. So, but I did think that was kind of weird. Shortly after this, they throw the show an escalating threat. A larger scale villain operation unfolds. Unlike Volume 1's more straightforward enemy, the conflict is strategic, coordinated, designed to break team unity. The enemy exploits philosophical pressure, not just the brute strength. This is very important because Deadpool's biggest weakness isn't power, it's instability. Obviously, he is a psychopath, so things not going the way they should be going or things going wild, out of pocket is going to cause him to go a little bit fucking nuts. And he's just at all times very unstable in general, so obviously not the best look or best thing to happen. Oh shit, I'm just realizing now, I don't think I mentioned his name the entire time. The main villain of the last book was Loki. I don't know how we went the entire book without mentioning it was Loki, but on me. It basically leads us directly to our next part of book 2. Civilian opinion begins to become a factor. Media questions the team's reliability, whether or not they can actually be trusted to protect the populace and or stop these threats and or villains from doing whatever villainous plan they want to construct. Obviously, with Deadpool's history and then just the character itself, how he behaves, he becomes a very easy scapegoat for the media and just the population in general to kind of look at as why they shouldn't trust this team, why they shouldn't get behind them like they behind so many other superhero teams that end up doing good. Like I was just saying, Deadpool's chaotic behavior is used as evidence against why the group should be trusted and or why the group should be let to do what they want to do and move on amongst their own devices. This is also important because not only for the first time in this book, but for the first time in just in general in a lot of the Deadpool stories, a lot of his actions don't normally have consequences beyond the leading into the next joke and or leading into the next punchline. So this is kind of a interesting dynamic, just seeing his actions and the way he does behave throughout the story kind of cause and lead to these consequences with the team not being trusted, them being looked down upon. It's all leading and directly caused by Deadpool's behavior and what he decided to do in this scenario, or he decides to do in each scenario. And this very much hits Deadpool harder than any sort of physical injury ever could. Obviously, with his healing factor, he's always been more willing to take damage and or take destruction, but this very much hits him in more of an emotional level than it does a physical level, which in a lot of times, especially with this story, seems to be what gets to Deadpool the most, are these emotional deep cuts rather than a physical deep cut. And then directly after this, we start to see something very, very peculiar for Deadpool comics, and that just the Deadpool character in general, which is silence. There are panels where he doesn't joke, he stares blankly, he questions whether he belongs in a structured hero culture and or just a structured hero team. It very much leans into a trope that the loudest character often hides the most insecurity and the most fear. And that very much kind of shows to be what Deadpool is, as much as loud as he is and as obnoxious and forward as he is, it seems to be, or at least comes off the more you get to know him through this book, as a facade to kind of put up to make himself feel more important or feel stronger than he already is. Which I think is kind of interesting just because I feel like a lot of people in real life do that without necessarily directly thinking about it. You'll get into a scenario where you try to overcompensate, that might not be the right word, but kind of overdo and overestimate yourself to make yourself seem bigger or better than you actually are, just so other people will look at you that way or see you that way. And obviously for that moment or for that time period, it might help or might get you the valid response that you want, but for the most part, none of these things are sustainable. Unless you're being who you actually are, or open to feeling what you're actually supposed to be feeling or are feeling at the time, you're never going to be able to be happy and just be. And him always looking down on himself and comparing himself to others and trying to be what he sees himself capable of being rather than what he should be. I think it's just a very, very interesting way of looking at the character, and then a lens to kind of just put over the character because, again, just comparing to other, and we will, after we get through all these books, we will compare them to a Deadpool story or two just to kind of show the comparisons. But they make his emotional depth a lot deeper in this than they do in a lot of Deadpool books to kind of show his growth even more throughout the story. And I think they did a really, really good job with that. Shortly after this, the villains are successful in creating tension within the team. Some members argue that argue whether or not Deadpool is too dangerous, if he was holding them back from being as powerful and or as recognizable as they could be. And they also start to question whether recruiting him in general was just a big mistake. Obviously, he's much more morally bleak than anyone else in the group, and he's much more aggressive and harder to control than anybody else in the group. And just so far within the first story, obviously he earned a little bit of respect from him, but he has hurt the group a lot with just his selfish and wanting to be the main star kind of actions. So Deadpool overhears this argument on whether or not bringing him in was a mistake. Instead of confronting them, he just kind of laughs it off. But internally, it very much devastates him. You see that it is kind of crushes him. This directly leads us into Deadpool trying to prove himself. Deadpool goes off alone to confront the threat. This, in a way, mirrors Volume 1, but a bit darker. This time, he isn't showboating. He's desperate. He's trying to justify his existence. The fight is very brutal. By the way, the big bad threat is Thanos. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I know I forgot to mention it was low-key in the last one until we just got done with it, so I want to make sure I mentioned that one. I thought it was kind of fucking crazy and shocking when Thanos appeared, but I don't know, I didn't see it coming at all. I was wondering what they were going to do, because obviously Loki's a relatively big bad, and then even after they dropped the Thanos bomb for this one, I was like, fuck, what are they going to do for the third one then, if a Thanos is already the big bad for this one? So, the fight is very brutal. His healing factor keeps him alive, but the art emphasizes the pain, the isolation, and the emotional fatigue that Deadpool has gone through in this battle, and then just battles leading up to this event in general. This is one of the most serious Deadpool portrayals probably in any medium that I've seen, whether it's comic book, movie, or now manga. His emotional depth and then just the emotional and physical growth that he goes through throughout this books are very incredible. Just knowing in some of the stories and having read a whole bunch of Deadpool comic books in the past, the way they were able to grow his character from the start to now where we are in the books, and then let alone where we get to in the books, is super fucking cool. Instead of winning alone, Deadpool fails, ends up losing to Thanos. The team arrives, and instead of scolding him, they fight alongside him. This is very much the emotional climax. He finally stops trying to be the main character. He fights with them, not in front of them. It's the first real big sign of teamwork, and that he's actually learned that he can't all do it all by himself and all that. Or rather, it's not the first time that he's shown to learn it, but it's the first time that he's proved it. The final battle shows growth in a couple of more subtle ways. He coordinates attacks, he takes hits strategically, he protects civilians first, he lets others land finishing blows. He's just openly being very much more team oriented and caring about what the team needs and what's the battle and the things are calling for in general, rather than what Deadpool wants to do or what Deadpool thinks would be a good idea. And this is very big because classic Deadpool obviously wouldn't ever be that person to give up the spotlight like this, or be that person to just stand back and let other people take the lead in the front row. So the team does end up defeating Thanos. The ending isn't triumphant, it's just kind of calm. Deadpool isn't fully reformed. He's still chaotic and he's still inappropriate and he's still probably truly not ready for this teaming thing in general, but now the team trusts him in battle. He doesn't need constant validation. He understands heroism isn't popularity. He still breaks the fourth wall, but it feels less desperate. It feels more like there's a reason behind him doing it rather than him just doing it. Originally, when I read this, I didn't think we needed a third one. I thought they did a good job kind of getting the characters over and getting the story over with this, and I also don't think the ending of this led us very much into a third one. But a couple things just kind of coming out of this book that it's a good thing to remember. Number one would be, I like to do things like this, validation versus belonging. Obviously, Deadpool in the beginning was very much like, notice me, notice me, notice me. And then by the end of the book, he was basically like, do I deserve to be here? Do I deserve to be noticed? Do I deserve to be on this team in general? Kind of thing. So that's pretty important. The mask of comedy in general. This manga very much reframes his humor as a trauma response or a fear reaction, or just a shield against vulnerability in general, rather than just something that he does, something that his character does. And then I think it's important to kind of just keep in mind that instead of like a lot of books, people will gain new powers or gain a new ability or blah 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 blah. Deadpool doesn't gain new powers or new abilities, anything like that. He literally just gains restraint. That's the real evolution. He gains the ability to kind of go beyond himself and think about the bigger picture the way a superhero with the abilities that he does have should do and should be able to do. So, I specifically, even if you don't, I don't necessarily think you should read the second one without reading the first one, but even if you only are going to read one of these mangas, the second book is probably the one to go with. I think it's without a doubt the most sincere Deadpool story, aside of some mainline Marvel runs, but for the majority of wise, it's the most sincere Deadpool story that we're going to come across straight up. It proves that Deadpool works in a shonen format because of his core struggle wanting to matter, fits perfectly into a manga storytelling structure. I think it's kind of a testing ground kind of thing, because I'm pretty sure this did happen before the X-Men one happened. And I'd like to think, even if it's not true, I could be completely bullshitting and wrong with all of this, but I'd like to think that they kind of use this as to see how other superheroes would do in this medium. I do always think, even after reading the X-Men ones, that Deadpool is the best one for this medium. But we can get into the third book now. So jumping right into the third book. It's very much a tonal shift. Book 3 is much more intense and emotionally focused on the arc of the series rather than any of the battles or anything that's really happening. It moves from proving himself to defining who he actually is in general. We start off with kind of the fallout from Volume 2. The story opens with the team damaged but stronger emotionally. Obviously, they trust each other more, and they specifically trust Deadpool now. Or at least trust him more than they did. Trust him enough to fight alongside him. Public trust partially restored. And obviously, like I was saying earlier, Deadpool's more restrained than he was before, so there's less of being afraid that he's going to fuck something up. But something feels off. Deadpool's quieter, the jokes are still there, but less frantic. The signals growth and vulnerability. Or this signals growth and vulnerability. Obviously, after the events of the first and second book, he's grown as a character a lot. He's not the same old Deadpool, so shortly after this, the new threat emerges. I will just spoil it now. It is Thanos again. Instead of a flashy villain introduction, Book 3 builds tension slowly. The new enemy's strategy is to divide heroes psychologically, exploit emotional weaknesses, attack indirectly rather than head-on. This arc focuses less on spectacle and more on mental warfare. The villain understands that Deadpool's biggest fear is irrelevancy. Nobody caring about him, nobody wanting him, nobody calling upon him. That is Deadpool's biggest, at least in this book, his biggest fear. Shortly after this, Deadpool begins to feel disconnected again. Even though the team trusts him now, he questions if they need him. He wonders if he's just comic relief. He struggles with being replaceable, thinking that down the line, if they needed to or could, they'll just get somebody else that can do the same thing he can, and he won't have his team anymore. This is deeper than volumes 1 and 2. Before he wanted approval, now he fears invisibility. He fears that nobody actually is going to care about him, even if he's there or not. Which I think is a very relatable thing, obviously, to just people in real life. A lot of the time, sometimes you'll find yourself falling into that scenario where you're thinking whether or not people are, even if you're not there, will people even notice or care, or will it even make a difference in anybody's day or life? And I'll give you that answer. Majority of the time, yes, it will. A lot of people get like that, and a lot of times you'll get into thoughts like that, but it's very normally, and most of the time, it's just in your head. You're questioning, how does this person really care about me? Most likely. A lot of it is just in your head, unless it's one of those scenarios where it's not, but majority of the time, it's just going to be in your head. But let's continue on here. Earlier in the books, the fourth wall breaks were very chaotic. Kind of just did them whenever you felt like doing them. There wasn't much to them. They become very reflective here. In these ones, Deadpool questions the narrative itself, talks about character arcs, wonders if growth makes him less entertaining. It's very meta, but it's also very existential. Even though he's poking out of the book and making it very much knowing that he knows it's a book, The questions he's asking are very much about his self-worth and his self-being and whether he's worth even being here, whether it even matters if he's there or not. And those are very, very, not even to mention those are deep questions for a comic book, for a Deadpool comic specifically. Those are very fucking deep questions and very deep ideals and thoughts to just kind of think about. So I thought like I was saying earlier, if you're going to read any of these, read the second one. But the third one does a really, really, really fucking good job at this too. So you definitely want to shout that out also. But, after that, obviously the villains plans succeeds temporarily. The team members doubt themselves. They're very much under pressure. The coordination falters. Personal insecurities surface. Instead of being the problem, like Volume 1, Deadpool becomes the emotional anchor, kind of trying to hold the team together as everyone else is falling apart and as himself is falling apart. That's kind of the major evolution and the major final form, for lack of a better term, of Deadpool in this book. He gets to that point where he finally proves without a shadow of a doubt that he is the character that he has been building up to be this entire book. It wasn't just a waste of time. It wasn't just a false prophet, for lack of a better term. This is kind of the turning point of the book too. Deadpool steps up. He stops trying to perform. He gives a surprisingly sincere speech about choosing to be a hero, accepting flaws, fighting even if no one cheers. Sorry. It's not overly sentimental. It's awkward and Deadpoolish, but it lands very much. And for the first time, he inspires others instead of parodying inspiration, instead of getting inspired by others himself. So this leads us directly into the final battle of the book. The climactic fight shows his complete arc. He coordinates strategy. He protects teammates instinctively. He makes tactical sacrifices. He fights without needing credit from anybody. He's just doing it to try to save the world and try to save his team. He very much doesn't win because he's strongest. He wins because he's steady. That's a huge growth from Volume 1. Obviously, Volume 1, he wanted to be the strongest. He wanted to be the most important. He wanted to be the biggest person there. This brings us directly into the resolution of this book and then the entire manga in general. The ending is quieter than expected. Deadpool makes jokes again, returns to chaotic behavior, breaks the fourth wall, but now it feels controlled, not desperate. He's no longer chasing validation. He's chosen his role, and he knows exactly who he is. Out of any of the books that we've done for this show so far, or manga or comic book, this is probably the most growth we've seen in a character in general. I think they did a really, really good job telling the story of his growth and then just showing the story of his growth in general also. And I really liked that story. I really liked how they did Thanos again for book 3, because when, like I was saying earlier, when I was reading book 2 and it ended up being Thanos, I was like, well, fuck, I don't know how they're going to go much higher than this, and it makes sense with this team being able to defeat him. So I like that they went with him again and just made the story a completely different story on what he was trying to do and why he was attacking and how he was attacking. I thought that was cool. For a minute here, before we get out of here or get too far out of here, I did want to just compare a little bit some other classic Deadpool comic stories to just these stories and the character growth of the character in this story in general. So let's do that real quick. So obviously Deadpool in the Earth 616 universe, and it's the mainline Marvel universe. He's the main character is Deadpool. The tone for his books in the main Marvel universe are very much dark comedy, ultra-violent, often cynical, heavy satire on superheroes and then just the Earth and the world going on around in general, and pop culture. The character's core, like ideals and values. He's mentally unstable, deeply traumatized. He's self-aware to a dangerous degree. He's often self-sabotaging. A lot of times he'll put himself in the situations where they're going to be shitty situations for him, but he wants connection. This is kind of similar to the comic, or to the manga. He wants connection, but very usually and often ruins it. The growth style in the Marvel universe is, well, his growth in the Marvel comics is very messy and inconsistent. He often regresses. He makes morally gray decisions. He sometimes becomes genuinely dangerous. Some runs explore serious themes like depression, abuse, identity fragmentation, fear of being unlovable, things like that, but for the most part, it's very much just a gory, kill 'em, slice 'em up kind of comic book. You're not really reading a Deadpool comic for the deep story arcs, opposed to the Deadpool Samurai, the manga. It's a bit of faster pacing, it's exaggerated comedy, very much a cleaner moral arc for all three of them. Manga Deadpool is still chaotic, still fourth wall breaking, but more emotionally streamlined. His insecurity is clearer and more focused. He wants to matter. And unlike the 616 universe, his growth in this book is very, very big. In the first book, he learns teamwork. The second book, he learns restraint. And then in the third book, he learns self-worth. It's structured like a classic anime character arc, and importantly, he actually evolves forward without heavily regressing really in any way. And the regression is mainly just because Marvel's been around for so long and they've been doing these characters for so long that eventually you're going to regress in some way to do other things with your characters from things you've already done. It's just part of the thing. Obviously, having an entire different world and an entire different story, you can tell you don't have to do that as much unless they start adding a bunch of things to this. Oh, I better be able to cut that sound out. That's going to piss me off. What was I saying? If they end up adding a bunch more mangas of Marvel characters and stuff to this universe, then they might have to regress in some ways for certain things and or just take back certain things. But I think the biggest difference in general is just very simple. In Marvel comics, he's a tragic clown who sometimes becomes heroic. In the manga, he's a chaotic clown learning to become a hero. Similar stories, but told differently and done in different ways. If you're into these redemption arcs and or these giant growth in character arcs, this is definitely a book I think you'll be into. If you're not, then I don't think so. If you're into manga and you're into Marvel, I think this is definitely a book you'll be into. If you're not necessarily into either, but you were interested in this episode, as you will hear in it, then I recommend you take a look at the episode. It's really, really cool, the book itself. But yeah, I really enjoyed that manga. We will do the X-Men one at some point. Next manga, I don't remember what I was saying earlier, will be the next one I do. Maybe, I think I said My Hero Academia will probably be next Friday for manga, so keep an eye on that. But that is officially all for this set of books. I very much enjoyed making this episode. I hope you guys enjoy listening to it. I know I said this earlier in the episode in the beginning, but never can say it too much. Before we get out of here, I did want to say again that we are up on YouTube. I think our first 8 episodes, maybe the 9th one, I'm not entirely sure. But we are up on YouTube. This episode's coming up. You're hearing this on Friday, or it's coming up on Friday. You're hearing this whenever you're hearing this. So this episode should be up on YouTube on Saturday. Monday's episode should be up on YouTube by Tuesday. And then vice versa. The YouTube's episodes should always be up a day or 2 days after the original upload on Spotify. I got a pretty cool story coming this Monday. I don't want to spoil it unless I already did in the last episode. I don't remember, but I don't think I did, and I don't plan on spoiling it. So be ready for that and be excited for that. For everyone who has followed and listened to the episodes and left a like or a comment, I want to thank you. For everyone who's liked and followed on the Instagram, I want to thank you. Helps so much more than you know. Making my dream come true. This is my favorite thing to do every week. The 2 times I do it a week. There is nothing I could be doing that would make me more happy than these. I'm already reading these books by myself in the first place, so I figure I might as well talk about them. Other people I know I enjoy hearing people talk about the same things that I enjoy, so I figure it's a similar thing. So thank you everybody for that, and thank you for everybody who's going to keep following and liking. I hope you enjoy this episode. Leave a like, a follow, everything of that nature, and that will be all for this episode. Dr. Panel out.